everybody. Welcome into this week's episode of the Talk to Walk podcast. I'm your host, Tyler Baker, and with me today on our show is another Tyler. We got him in the house, finally, our new college / young adult pastor. He's also like a senior adult pastor, missions pastor. I don't even know what else we would...
That's about it.
Is that it? Just those three?
It, yeah.
Is that it?
That's right.
Man, it's so good
Looks
to have
good
you.
on the profile on the website.
Yeah. It's a good resume builder, right?
That's right.
But man, we're glad to have you in the house. Quickly become one of my best friends in the world, and today just kind of wanting to talk through the idea of handling transition in your life. And before we get there, I got a question. What is your favorite fast food?
Yeah, well, we were talking about this earlier, and I informed you that on your recent trip to Nashville that you should have driven through the closest one to us and the best, which is Whataburger. Any patty melt that you go get anywhere else, sit down, you can pay $20 for it or something like that. You can go to Whataburger, get it with the spicy ketchup, all that. Yeah. So the patty melt at Whataburger, number one.
I've never been to Whataburger.
It's number one.
Never been.
Yeah. Oh, it's great. I was in Texas for a few years, and there was one way too close to my house. So I ate it way too often.
Weren't you like around an In-N-Out though?
Yeah. No, In-N-Out's worse than McDonald's.
See, I've heard that,
Yeah,
but it's almost as if it's
too dry.
Like In-N-Out is a sensation, though. I mean,
I don't know
literally
why.
is like you walk in there and it's like, I'm at In-N-Out.
No, I've never understood it.
I've never been either.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when there's a Whataburger and an In-N-Out, it's Whataburger every time.
See, I've never been. I mean,
yeah.
I'm cool with like Five Guys.
Five Guys is good. It's not Whataburger.
Chick-fil-A. They don't sell burgers, but
Yeah.
So Whataburger, if you're listening, go to Whataburger wherever you're at.
That's right.
But man, today I'm excited about this episode. We are going to be talking about how to handle transitions, and something I've found in my life as a student pastor, but also as a 28, almost 29 next month. Shout out, my birthday's coming up. Found is there's always some type of transition that we're going through in life. I mean, whether it's coming out of a grade into another grade, going from high school to college, it's, single to dating, engaged, married, we're always transitioning. And so for you, I know that your story has a lot of transitions in it.
Yeah.
I mean, you're what, 30?
Yeah.
And how many times have you moved?
I've moved 4 times, and 2 of those moves have been 4,000 miles each. So, yeah.
What?
Yeah. So transition is probably, I've never thought about that until right now, but that's probably a good word to kind of summarize the life of Tyler Sulfridge. It's been one filled with transition.
4,000 miles.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've moved 4 total times in your life.
4 big true moves where I stayed. I've done a couple internships in a couple states, which would probably count as moves as well. But yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Dude, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Because you moved from, I know you're from Kentucky originally.
That's right. Go Big Blue.
Go Cats, baby.
Right.
Come on.
Yeah, so I was born in Kentucky. Lived there till I was 11.
Where at?
Williamsburg.
Okay.
Not far from.
Shout out to the Patriots.
That's right. Yes.
University of Cumberland's alumni right here.
It is. So lived there until I was 11. Then my family, my dad's job, he wasn't in ministry at all. I'm sure we'll talk about that at some point. My dad's kind of path to ministry, and it affected our whole family. Yeah. But yeah, I lived in Kentucky till I was 11. We moved to Tennessee, lived here until I was 22. I moved to Colorado at one point in that span. I did a summer internship out there for 3 months right outside of Denver. That was awesome.
Go Bronx.
Russell Wilson.
Man, I don't think he's doing it.
Yeah, no,
I just don't think he's doing it.
It's over for him. Yeah. The Seahawks, they got Geno now, so that's good to call. So went to Colorado, came back here for about a year. My whole family moved to Alaska. I was up there. I was in Tok with my mom and dad for 2 years, and then I moved a couple hundred miles away from them, also in Alaska though, and lived there for 2 years. Then moved down here. Spent a summer in Georgia, and the day after the internship ended, I started a job in Texas. Yeah, it was crazy. And then about 6 months ago, got to move back here. So
good old East Tennessee.
That's right. Yeah, good. It's home here. So I love being back, and it's been awesome. But yeah, filled with transition, and so I've had to think a lot about that. And every time you transition, you have to process so much. I mean, you have to process some physical things, just being in a different location. It's emotional. You're leaving people. You're meeting people. It's mental. There's so much to think through. And then it's spiritual. And I think a lot of times when you transition, you don't think about what that does to you spiritually or what it's doing to you. And I think a lot of times, too, we don't think about, what just happened in my life for 4 years or 10 years, however long I was in a location. What is it like? Where was I when I started? And where am I now that I'm leaving? Because I think we get so caught up in the day-to-day that we really don't notice, like, what God's done in our lives. But when you transition, that's kind of a good time to look back and say, man, when I started, I was there. And when I left, now I'm at a totally different place. And so it's kind of, I think transition's good because it gives you a snapshot of everything that's happened in your life. So
yeah, man, that's good. And I'm tracking with that, and also too, I'm sitting here as you're talking, thinking about in my life, bro. I moved 11 times in the same county before I was 12 years old.
Okay, wow.
I mean, like, I'm talking packing the house up and going.
Yeah.
And as an adult now, looking back on that, I'm like, dude, that is so many things. But it was only not 100 miles or 200 miles down the road. It was a couple minutes.
Right.
And so I can imagine as a young dude picking up everything that you knew in your early 20s and literally moving to the northwest part of the country, the continent. Yeah. I mean, you're above Canada at this point, man. Yeah. Like, what was that like?
Yeah.
I mean, what was going through your head? Yeah. Was it like the transition itself was fearful? Was it the fear of the future? Like, what all was happening there?
Yeah, I mean, I remember it pretty well. I was 22, and my mom and dad.
Shout out to T Swift.
That's right. They were nice. I didn't catch that. My mom and dad, they were at the house one night. My dad had gone on a mission trip to Alaska. He was sent out from Second for a week short-term mission trip, and went up there. And I guess at some point while he was up there, God worked on his heart in a certain way that he was like, I'm going to move up here. And so he knew that that's what God wanted him to do, but he kind of tells the story. He was like, I'm going to go home and tell Shelly, his wife, my mom, that hey, God's calling me to Alaska, and she's going to tell God, no, he's not, and I'm off the hook, right? I'm good. Right. And so he eventually asked my mom to pray about it, and she was all for it. Was like, yeah, this is what God, she's never been to Alaska at that point. So she prayed through and was like, I think God may be doing something here. And so we kind of take some week-long trips up there, some short-term stuff. But I remember when they told me that they were moving, I'm running out of the house to meet some friends. I'm 22. I've got a job, that kind of stuff. Life is good here. Wasn't really thinking a ton about transition at that point, or moving or anything. And I'm leaving the house, and they're like, hey, we want to talk to you real quick before you leave. I'm thinking, what did I do? I'm in trouble. This is not good. So I'm thinking of excuses. That's right. Thinking of how I could get out of this. And they're like, hey, we just wanted you to know we're moving to Alaska. They
dropped that on you?
Cool. Yeah. Just like sitting on a couch in the living room. We're just like, hey, we're moving. And I was like, okay. And they were like, you're 22, you've got a job, your life's here. Like, we're not saying God's calling you to do that or anything. But if you want to go, you're welcome to. And I was like, I'm in. And they were like, don't you need to pray about it? And I got real holy real quick. I was like, yeah. I already have been. But yeah, I did start praying about it, but really from the start, it was, I need to do this. I was looking for a path into ministry, and I thought that may be through that internship that I did in Colorado. That wasn't it. It was through Alaska. And so when you're actually in the process of moving, it's hard because, moving back here, I've gotten to move so many times. Like, moving back here, I'm already familiar with so many things. Right. And so you kind of build in some expectations, which makes it hard at times. The great thing, but the really hard thing about moving to Alaska is there are no expectations. Like, you have no idea what life's going to look like. You don't know really the town that you're moving to or anything. And so there's that kind of whole just kind of you're apprehensive about what's about to happen. I mean, we were asking questions. The town that my mom and dad live in, it's called Tok, and it regularly hits 60 degrees below zero up there in the winter. Yeah, they're below freezing for 7 months out of the year. And so you're all of a sudden having this conversation about how do you stay warm? What do I need to wear
How do
today?
I not freeze today?
Right. Yeah. Like, not just stay warm, but like, how do we exist in this? How do cars, even the process of starting your car when it gets to 30 degrees below zero changes, right? And so you're just kind of like, we were all of a sudden having these conversations about what does life look like in Alaska and what's about to change, and you don't know what that is until like the day presents itself. And so you have this really great opportunity to like really rely on the Lord and just say, you have truly, we moved 4,000 miles. We didn't know anyone in this town really, and we were going to start planting churches amongst a people group that we knew absolutely nothing about. And so you have to become a sponge. It's like being a kid again. You're looking at everything, you're hearing everything, you're watching everything, and you're just paying attention to the smallest things. And I can remember it. We had all sorts of conversations with our, just the family, of just like tears. Like, what are we doing here? Why are we actually here? Like, how is God going to provide for us? And I think, like I said a minute ago, you have to process your emotions. I think it's best to express your emotions, right? Like, we get into these modes, especially for guys, where what do? We just suppress it and act like it's all good. But it was really good for us as a family to say, hey, I'm not all good today, right? Like, yesterday was awesome. Today is terrible. And so it's good to just be able to look across, have people with you, and be able to express exactly where you're at. And so, I would say those are kind of just at the baseline, some of the things that you start to go through when you make a massive transition in your life. Yeah,
the thing you said about the guy part is what I feel like, we as friends, but even, more so, it's true, and we resonate with it, is that the guy is always the person in the transition that seems the coolest on the outside,
right,
but is always the most tore up on the inside.
Yeah.
Not that the female aspect, if you're married or have a family, is not hurting,
right,
but you've got to make it work.
Yeah.
And this is all the eggs are in this basket.
Yeah.
So for that, as a 22-year-old guy just saying yes to Alaska.
Yeah.
First off, I'm sure the first question you had was, do we have to live in an igloo?
Yeah, that's asked often.
Straight up.
Yeah.
I'd be like, where are we going to live? In a hut? What are we doing? Yeah. But the other part of that is you're literally leaving everything you've ever known. And I think in transition, that's where a lot of people get caught up.
Yeah.
Is that, okay, I know that this is on the horizon, and it's almost like you mourn it. You grieve that because you're comfortable. You have your people, you have your place, you feel like you have your spot.
Yeah.
And then God is like, boom, or your job is like, hey, we're going to Cali, and you live in New York. It's all these different things. I feel that the hardest part of it is actually allowing yourself to think as a human, and not think as a doer.
Yeah.
Transitions we do. We literally just want to get it done, get the grind going, get away, put the emotions at bay. And I love how you said that you all had days where it's like, no, this sucks.
Yeah.
It's hard.
And that's one of the things, like when I was moving to Alaska, one of my closest friends that I grew up with here, Heath and Alex Fletcher, and I grew up with those guys. And when I was moving, they were here with me. And so we were talking about it. But I didn't even realize I was doing it. Like, I remember one time Fletcher and I were driving down the road and we were talking about it, and I hadn't really processed it. And I hadn't even moved yet. And I just start, I'm crying hard. And I'm like, I don't know why God is doing this, right? But I had at that point realized, God is really moving Tyler. This isn't just for my parents, it's for me too. And so I felt like, I need to do this. Not just that I want to, not just that I'm cool with it, but I really need to do this. And so there were times of leaning into people. The hard thing is when you've gone through a transition like that, and you hit it on the head, you're mourning that because relationship is going to be broken. Yeah. To some extent, you may still be friends, but it's never going to be the same. Mm-hmm. If you're gone 6 months or a year and you come back, it's different. And so I remember when I moved to Alaska and I was leaning on people. I remember though, and this is hard, when I was moving from Alaska to Texas, Months before I ever left, I started pushing people away.
Yeah.
Right. Like going into this whole, okay, I know what I got to do. I'm going to get school done. I'm going to finish up at the church. I'm going to go through my punch list. I'm going to pack. I got to get this U-Haul. I mean, you're just bang, 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 bang. And you go into this mode, like you said, of I'm just going to get everything done. And all of a sudden you look up and there are people around you that they're losing you. And they need a part of you.
Yeah.
And I was unwilling to give that. And it was really hard. And we ended up having some really tough conversations with some really good friends because they were like, Tyler, you've moved. Like, you're moving, but you're already gone. Right? But you're still here. But you're not. Like, emotionally you're shut down. Mentally you're shut down. And it's self-preservation. It's
right.
Man, I know what it feels like to move. And the crazy thing is nobody in Alaska is from Alaska, right? Everybody gets
right.
there from somewhere.
Yeah, that's true.
And so they were all like, we do too. But you're not allowing us to be a part of this, and we love you. And so it was hard to have those conversations too of, yeah, you're right. Like I kind of shut you guys down, which hurt you just to protect me so that I don't feel as hurt, right? And so it could get really selfish really quickly. And so I would tell people, if you're moving and your mom needs an extra hug her. If people need to see your emotion, show it. Yeah. And if people, they just want to eat with you or hear what you're thinking or processing, let people into that, because God may transition them He will, right? You don't know what that transition is going to be, but He will transition people. And so I think it's really important to just go ahead and kind of take that facade and break it down and just be where you're really at in front of people and let them see that's good for you and it's good for them too. So.
Yeah, I mean, dude, that's such wisdom, because I'm sitting here as you're talking, I'm listening and thinking. I mean, the transitions I've had are small. I mean, I moved from Kentucky 2 hours down here. I didn't move 4,000 miles across the country to live in an igloo. I mean, that wasn't my life. Yeah. But even moving 2 hours down the road, man. Yeah. I mean, I had a little brother,
right? And
so even our relationship has been different.
Yeah. And
I didn't realize, like my mom would tell me all the time, is that, the transition is good for you because this is where God's calling you to, but it sucks for us.
Yeah.
I mean, and man, I think we as people, we're just communal people. Right. We're relational people. That's what we were created to be, as a community and in a relationship with other people. And I think that's probably the first thing we forget.
Right.
So whenever you look back on that, we're talking about it, moving on already, and you're still there.
Yeah.
What did it take for you to realize that you had moved on, but you shouldn't have yet?
Really good friends. That, I mean, like you said, you're communal with people, and Philippians 3 says it, like count others more significant than yourselves.
Yep.
And as I walked through that season, it was about Tyler Sulfridge, right? I was living in this little mountain town called Palmer. My mom and dad were 8 hours away. I was just
in the same state.
I mean, in the same
Clarify.
state. That's right. Yeah,
Alaska's
that's
really
right.
big.
It's big. It's 6 hours in the summer. It's 8 hours in the winter. Okay. So it's however much ice is on the road. Right. I'm living there, and I know that I'm about to move by myself. Here's how intense I was about this, just to be completely honest. I scheduled it out where I left the state the day I graduated. I'm the first guy in my family to graduate from college.
Wow. The
ceremony ends, my dad and I go get in my truck and leave, because I was like, I just want to, like, I'm on to the next thing. And my dad and I get in the car and in my truck, and we're leaving, and he was like, well, that was cool. What do you think? College graduate. And I was like, I said this, I was like, I think that's over, and I just want to look forward. And he was like, celebrate things, right? Like, enjoy this moment. And I was so kind of obsessed, like, with just, I knew how much I loved Alaska. Mm-hmm. I was so close with the guys there that I just wanted the transition to be on, right? But I had this really good friend, his name's Justin. We still talk. And one day he took me out to dinner and was like, Tyler, like, we've lived life together for 4 years. He thinks of me as a little brother. And he was like, we're losing you. But he was like, we know you're going through things. We know this is going to be difficult, but you're pushing us all away. And so he talked to me about, he didn't make it so much about me. He made it about the people that I love. And that's what I would want to do if I were in that situation. I'm sure I will be someday, of watching someone transition. Like, don't go to them and say, hey, you're transitioning, but we want to hear about what you're thinking, what you're feeling, all that. Make it about the people around them, right? Like, hey, your mom and dad, they need you. Your siblings, right? Like your little brother, even though you're 2 hours away, they still need a piece of you, and that's hard to do because, we believe in being present where we're planted. But at the same time, there are people that you leave behind, or that kind of they transition and you're kind of left behind, that you've given a lot of yourself to. And they need to see, how you're doing and how you're feeling and all that. But it really came down to just a couple older, wiser guys coming to me and saying, Tyler, like we need you. This isn't about you, and it's selfish, and that's sin, right? And so it's good that people would be so loving and so kind to say, if you leave this way, you won't be leaving well. And when I left Texas, I had a friend tell me, like, hey, one of the hard things for me, he was our student pastor, and he and I worked together for 4 years, but really closely for 2 years. And he said, Tyler, like, one of the hard things for me is ministry is transition, right? Yeah. Like, I would love to say, this second is going to be the church that I serve for the rest of my life. I don't know how that's going to play out, though, but because there's so much transition in ministry. And so he told me, like, one of my things is when people don't leave well. And I said, Andrew, man, thank you for saying that. It was a good reminder for me because I have left poorly before. Mm-hmm. And I stayed present. I got to baptize a kid on the last day that I was there. And so it was kind of like a second chance, it felt like, that I wanted to make sure for 3 weeks. Here's how hard I swung it. For 3 straight weeks, every breakfast, lunch, and dinner was spent with someone.
Dude.
I said, I'm not going to leave anybody saying, like, yeah, Tyler left before he was really gone. I was like, no, and it was hard. I'm an introvert, you know me. Right. That I get spent pretty quickly. You do.
You'll go take a 3-hour nap after this episode.
Right. At the end of this
minutes,
podcast,
40 minutes max, and he's like, I'm out.
So I for 3 weeks, every meal was with someone. I was going to coffee with people, and I wanted to make sure that they all knew, like, how much I valued their friendship and how significant they had been to my life. And not all of them, some of them I haven't talked to since that meal, right? Mm. But I wanted them to know, for the 4 years that I was in Texas, you guys meant the world to me. And here's the way I can show that, is I'm gonna count myself less significant, and I'm gonna spend my time with you.
Yeah. And I think it's so difficult to make sure that you're still touching those that are in your inner circle.
Yeah.
Just because you have so many other things in the back of your mind.
Right.
So let's talk about the process of transition then.
Yeah.
In that processing for you, what, not to Alaska, obviously you were a little younger. Let's talk about the older Tyler here. Yeah. When you were going from Alaska to Texas, and you knew that, okay, this may not be my last stop.
Right.
Was it almost as if there was some relief in that? Knowing that you're going to have to transition again, but that you could do it right that time?
Yeah.
Or were you not even thinking, but you were just there, ready to go?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question, honestly. I think in my head, I probably wasn't thinking about that so much because, you don't ever arrive at a place with the idea of, like, hey, I may be leaving.
Right.
You may leave at some point, but yeah, when I showed up in Texas, I think probably maybe a little subconsciously, like in my head, I was like, I probably won't be. I didn't know one person in Texas when I got there, right? And so I probably wasn't thinking, like, I'm going to be here for the rest of my. But then all of a sudden you start getting close to people.
Yep.
And you start making friends all over again. And you mentioned your inner circle, like, you form a new one. Mm-hmm. And so I had, everywhere I've gone, truly like even here now, the Lord has brought about 3 to 4 guys that are in my stage of life around me, and we've lived it up. Like you and I, we golf together, we eat together, we have a great time. But then we also, you and I've been here 6 months. We've both walked through some difficult things together. Yeah. And so I think, I showed up in Texas, and I probably wasn't thinking I'm going to be here for the rest of my life. But then all of a sudden, you get close with people, and your heart lands there, right? And your emotions are tied up there. And so you just start to think, maybe I will be here forever. And I want to be with these people. I don't want to leave. Texas, it's the exact opposite of Alaska, right? There's snow-capped mountains everywhere. It's cool everywhere you go. Texas is flat. It's 110 degrees, right? It's awful.
Misery.
Yeah, it's awful.
Misery.
And I'm driving down the interstate, and I'm looking both ways in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, and there are housetops. I'm like, this is so ugly, right? It's terrible. And so physically, probably not the place that I would want to be in the Metroplex. But the people were so great that I was like, yeah, I want to be here. And so when you start to leave, you gotta go through the whole process all over again. But I think of Matthew 6:33, seek first the kingdom of God and His righteousness, and that's what I've tried to do every time. It's like, this transition's going to be hard, but I really believe that this is the way in this moment. This is how I believe I can best glorify God. And so that's why transitions are worth it. My mom and dad are 4,000 miles away. I get to see them, if we're fortunate, 2 times a year. That's hard. FaceTime, all those things make it, text, phone calls. So it's it's pretty easy. But when you're starting to get to that 6-month mark and you haven't seen your folks or your family, you're like, this is starting to get hard. But I tell people all the time, I would way rather know that I'm doing today exactly what God called me to do, and my parents are 4,000 miles away doing exactly what they believe God called them to do, and us live in that, than me see them every day and one of us have to say, like, yeah, I know God didn't call me to do this, but at least I'm with my family. Right? Like this James says, this life is a vapor. It's here 1 second and then it's gone. So, I don't know what it's going to be like to relate to my parents in heaven. But I know that the most glorifying thing that we can do for the Lord today is be 4,000 miles apart, loving God with our whole heart, soul, mind, and strength, and the people that God put around us. That's what I know for them, and I know for me. So
yeah, that's good, man. That's so good. Yeah. And being in student ministry and you're in college ministry, I think the transitional process has become something that we want to expedite. Due to social media. Think about it, bro. You're on TikTok scrolling through one video, boom, you're onto a whole nother topic. And even in your mind, even though it's social media and you're scrolling, it's a transition for you, because you have to start thinking differently with everything you see.
Right.
And I'm a believer in this, is that, obviously what you're seeing and how you're allowing your brain and your mind to be formed is going to eventually come out into your life. I mean, dude, I have students all the time, seniors, I don't know about college and the whole, my best friends, and I tell them, I'm like, look, I've been there.
Yeah.
And the best friends that I had in high school, I literally could not tell you, Tyler, the last time I've talked to someone.
Yeah.
But the friends I've gained in the transitions that I've made in my life are lifelong friends, brothers, and even sisters. And I met my wife through a transition. And so I feel like we have the mindset behind it that we have to expedite it because we're afraid to feel, and we're afraid to process. We're afraid to we put that wall up, and we're afraid that, okay, I know this is about to be difficult. Like you said, you did in Alaska, you put the wall up. I think that's us in generality.
Right.
Think about, we had a family here in our student ministry that, was talking about moving states for a job, and their kids were all tore up, and the mom and dad were like, this is good for our family.
Yeah.
But then they started having family conversations and realized this is not good for our kids.
Okay. Yeah.
This is not healthy. This is going to tank them.
Yeah.
And I think allowing yourself to come back into that mode of, like you said before, thinking of others before yourself helps everyone.
Yeah.
And, it's so funny, man. I'll never forget this story. I had an 8th grade girl when I was in Kentucky, and she was like, I don't want to go to high school. I want to stay in middle school. This is so awesome. And I said, trust me, you do not want to stay in middle school.
No.
But she was so afraid of what she would lose. She wasn't focused on what she was gaining.
Yeah.
And now she's at the University of Kentucky, killing it, going to be a doctor. I mean, doing incredible things. Yeah. But it was in that season of her life, she was looking for someone to help. And so let's talk about that. For the people that are maybe in transition, if you're listening right now or watching on YouTube, if you're in the middle of a transition, I want to say this before I even ask this question, don't transition alone, because you'll never transition well.
That's good. Yeah.
When you try to do it on your own, you always fall flat on your face.
That's right.
And for you, you had that one friend, but let's talk about Texas to here.
Yeah.
Let's go a little deeper to current now. Yeah. You're in Texas 4 years.
Yeah.
Relationships are solid. Ministry's good. You're at a good church, big city. You know, you're going to Maverick games. Yeah. Shout out to Luca.
Yeah.
And you
Monday
know,
Night Football at Jerry World, that was sweet. Yeah,
I'm sure the stadium was cool, but the team was not good.
Better barbecue. We talked about that too. So
brisket.
all those, you got to leave all those things. Yeah,
man, that would be hard for your boy. That Texas brisket. But
back on track.
Oh man, well now I'm sitting there salivating. But you know, you finally find a rhythm in life, okay? You've moved to Alaska, now you're in Texas. Okay, now you're coming back to Tennessee. It's almost like you made a big circle around the United States of America. And how old are you when
30.
you moved here? You were 30 or 29?
29.
So you've lived life.
Yeah.
You've learned some things. You got a master's degree, you know, so you're a lot more experienced in how to handle those things in your life. How hard was it still?
It was still hard because, I think the hard thing, like I said, kind of to start this deal is when we moved to Alaska, no expectations.
Yeah.
I moved here, and in my head it was like, wait, things have changed, right? Like that person doesn't live there anymore. I mean, even you and I are in student ministry and college ministry. When I left, the guys that are in my ministry right now that are 18 and 19 were 10 and 11, right? So elementary school. So I'll walk by.
That'll make you feel old.
It's gross. So I'll walk by some guys now, and I don't know them all yet. And so I saw one of our students the other day, and I was like, wait a second. Like I met Morgan Irwin. So I met her, and then I was like, hey Morgan, nice to meet you. All that. Walk away, and then it dawns on me. I was like, I turned around. I'm like, Morgan. And I was like, you're Adam's daughter? I was like, you were this big, like when I left, right? So I'm old enough to be doing that. Like, and now a lot of people, I mean, grew up here, right? We joined this church when I was probably 11 or 12. And so, you know, the 15, you start driving 16, 18. Mm-hmm. So people all the time, they'll walk up and they'll say, oh, I remember when you, and I'm like, oh no, please don't say it. And so, it was, I think I had expectations built in. And I think the great thing for me has been to constantly remind myself is that nothing is constant, right? Like the people that were, I mean, when I left, you weren't here, right? Half the guys that we surf with on staff here weren't here. Yeah. And so I think it's been a good reminder for me of God is doing something in everyone's life. The guys that I grew up with, I love them. Some of them are still around here. We get together every now and then, but God's done some different things, and it's not like it was when we were 16, and it's not like it was when we were 22 when I moved. It's completely different. Some of them are married. Some of them have kids, and it's better, I think, to just go ahead and celebrate that. Rather than kind of like to stay in that mourning. Like it's good to mourn like we talked about. But if you stay there, it's not healthy. And so go ahead and thank the Lord and praise Him for the fact that He's done some amazing things in your life, in mine, while I was in Alaska, while I was in Texas. And you're right, it's been a massive circle. And now it's cool to come all the way back to what I consider home and say, God, like there are some things that are different. And that's hard.
Shout out to my wife for calling me.
Hey, Audrey. There are some things in in people's lives that are different, and I wish they were I liked them a lot the way they were, but you've chosen to change them. I think all things work together for the good of those who love you. I love you. They love you. So I'm just going to worship you for what you're doing in their life and in mine. So
that's good. It makes me think of a quote from probably, in my opinion, the best Christian rapper out there, Andy Mineo. He's the Eminem of the CCM world. He says, and this was on a tour when he first got going, he said, the only thing consistent in life is change.
Yeah.
And I'm in college listening to this, and I resonated with that.
Yeah.
Because not only had I transitioned from my hometown to a college which was only an hour away,
right,
but I'm tracking towards ministry. I know that, okay, what I've been told since I've been called to ministry is that where God puts you, you go.
That's right.
And as difficult as it is, you go.
Yeah.
You know, and man, when he said that, I was in a season of my life where I was kind of struggling with that because I was at school, but I was also on staff at a church in my hometown. So I was driving back and forth twice a week.
Yeah.
And it's almost as if I never really got to transition because I was still attached to the hip at home.
Yeah.
And I found even me in that process of really allowing myself to be freed from what I've known to go into the future of the unknown.
There you go.
That's where the most growth came.
Absolutely.
I mean, I would not be the man I am today. I know you would probably say the same if the experiences of transitions had never happened in your life.
Yeah.
And so to those that are listening, I want to encourage you, but also I want to speak from the heart here is that when you transition in life, it's not always the end of the rope.
That's right. Yeah.
A lot of people take it as I'm leaving everything. I don't know anybody.
Yeah.
God is so sovereign and so faithful to put people in your way. I mean, for me, you know, coming here to Clinton, I moved from Kentucky to Knoxville 2 hours, not 4,000 miles.
Still a move, though.
But it was still a move.
Yeah, that's
I had one guy, my best friend in all the world that I've been friends with for 10 years, lived here.
Yeah.
And I moved in with an apartment with him and a random dude. We became buds.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden I have a community around me, and I'm where I am today because of that move.
Yeah.
And so, man, if you're in the middle of a transition right now or you're about to face one, I just want to say this to you because I had to say it to myself. The first step is the hardest, but the next step is the easiest.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
Because you think about it, man.
Yeah.
You know, your first day back in the gym after New Year's Eve, it's the hardest day of your life.
Yeah, it's usually my last one, too. So the next day usually is way easier.
Tyler walks in and that free 3-day pass, baby. That's all you want. But you walk into the gym or you walk into your first day on your new job, and it's awkward as mess.
Yeah.
But then day by day by day, you begin to open and see, okay, this is going to work. This is going to be good. Though it's hard, you still have tough days. The goodness that's coming is worth the process.
And if I can, real quickly, I don't know how much time we have left. This is fun, but I would say this too. You and I are in ministries that deal with transition.
Oh, yeah.
Like you've probably got freshmen coming to you like, hey, I don't know where I'm going to go to college.
Oh, bro. Dude,
well, don't worry.
Bro, I've got kids that are like, man, I'm in 8th grade, bro. I want to play college baseball. I'm like, bro, you haven't even hit puberty yet. like you're still 12 with no facial hair and you talk like a pipsqueak. Like, come on, bro.
Yeah. And so, I mean, you've got them in your ministry. I've got them in mine. And I tell them all the same thing. There's this fear factor, honestly, of like, hey, I'm about to make this. And that's the hard thing is, a lot. Where am I going to go to college? What am I going to study? You know, who's going to be my roommate? All those things. It's really the first kind of adult decision that some of our kids have to make, right?
Yep.
And so, because they are that, they're still kids. And so, I tell them all, believe two things: all things work together for the good of those who love Him, and God's kingdom, His will, is not like if you're going to do that, then you're not going to get it wrong. So I'm going to seek God and love Him with my whole heart. And I know He's got a good, pleasing, and perfect will for my life. If you believe those two things, don't worry about getting it wrong. Don't worry about, am I going to go to ETSU or Tennessee Tech? If you're saying I'm going to arrive on campus and I'm going to study and I'm going to live my life for His glory, then you're not going to get it wrong. For some people, you and I in ministry, God gets really specific. But even that, it takes a little while for Him to get specific, right?
Oh, yeah.
I knew I wanted to be in the local church. It was from when I felt called to ministry to the time I actually stepped into a job serving in a local church was 5 years. And so sometimes it takes a little while. And so I tell people, don't get wound up. You know, God's He's got what He calls a good, pleasing, and perfect will for your life. And the crazy thing is you get to know it you get to know that will, but you don't get to know it all today. So if you get caught up in trying to figure out God's will for your whole life today, it's going to get really miserable really quick. So enjoy transition.
Yeah.
Enjoy getting to know new people and having new experiences, because you and I can both at this point in our lives look back and say, man, that was really, really hard. And I'm really, really thankful I walked through it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would tag on to that, not only to enjoy the transition, but also know that it's okay to hurt.
Yeah. Yeah.
That hurt is not a sign of weakness.
That's right.
And our culture has made it that you can't cry or you can't, the man specifically. But man, it sucks sometimes. It's just tough.
Yeah.
But when you feel it and you allow yourself to be open to it, there's an authenticity that comes from you that other people gravitate towards.
That's right.
It's more than, okay, hey, this is my junk. No, this is my life.
Yeah.
Here's my heart on the table.
Yeah.
Take it or leave it. And man, I've found more friends than I could count by allowing my heart to be on the table and talking about what I'm going through than when I was saying, "No, bro, I'm good."
Because
I'm
if you
good.
shut down, you're probably not going to enjoy that transition because nobody's going to be there with you.
And you're in your own misery.
That's right.
You're living in it.
Yeah.
And it's like a hot tub of misery.
Yes.
You're comfy and then you get hot and you're like, this sucks, but you can't get out.
That's it.
And and there was a line. I always have a line that I always, think of and try to say. And this line was actually from Robbie Gallaty. I'm in the Replicate ministry with him, and he's a solid guy, full of wisdom. Robbie, if you're listening, I want you on my podcast. That'd be awesome. But he said this.
Yeah, he's got to live up to this, though.
Oh, yeah, live
So
up to you. That's a low standard to reach, man. I feel like he could reach it just by being on his knee because he's taller than both of us on his knees, probably, because we're short. He's like 6'6", huge.
That's 1 foot taller than me.
But one thing he said last year at our Replicate retreat is he was talking about his story of climbing the ladder and wanting to be the best, and he came from Chattanooga to Nashville in that transition. He was trying to climb the ladder in the political side of the church. And he said, God told him, and he told us this as pastors and leaders, as he said that in that transition, I realized after God broke me that I made that transition all about me.
Yeah.
He said that I was climbing a ladder. I was trying to do everything that I could do to make myself successful so that the transition was better. And in the meantime, it actually hurt me worse than it helped me.
Yeah.
And so when I'm sitting there taking this in, I'm thinking of all the times in my life I've made it about me.
Yeah.
And then I'm going, okay, this is really about what God's doing.
That's right. Yeah.
This isn't about what Tyler can do. Yeah. This isn't about how I feel. Granted, it sucks and you need to talk about your emotions, but this is about taking a faith step in your life.
Yeah.
And I think right now, if you're someone that's about to transition to a new job, or maybe you just moved and you landed on our podcast, or maybe, you've got friends that are leaving, allow yourself to be as present as possible, but allow God to use you the most.
Yeah.
Because it's when God uses you the most that you're the freest.
Yeah. And if you're going to shut down, it's going to be really hard for God to use you. He's going to have to open you up, right?
Yeah.
And so he's going to have to do some things in you before he can use you. And so if you go into it and say, I'm going to do those things I know are right. I am going to worship the Lord. And what's that mean? I'm going to jump into a local church. Right? Or I'm going to find a college ministry on campus or something like that. Or, you're going to do some of those things that are right. I'm going to get to know people. I'm going to go ahead and start serving. I'm going to get into the same kind of rhythms of life. But if you jump into a place and you kind of put up all the barriers and stuff, God's going to open you up. Mm-hmm. But it's going to be way more painful, I think. So, it's good.
Yeah, good. Well, man, I've thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. And, man, our hope with this podcast, and, if you're watching on the video, it's truly that the conversations that we have, and we say this weekly, is our conversations comes from our desire to help those that are listening walk better in their life. And right now, if you're going through a transition, if you're dealing with something, maybe even a loss in your family or a loss of a job and trying to figure out the next step, or you're in the middle of the next step, the one thing that my pastor always told me that I now tell students and people around me is trusting God is never wasted trust.
There you go. Yeah.
It's never wasted. that when you truly submit and say, God, this life is yours, even if you're not a believer, I would encourage you to lean into that truth, praying, that God would reveal himself to you. But there's always a purpose for the plan, and in the pain you find the purpose.
That's good.
And the pain of transition is worth it.
Yeah.
And so I believe that we're called to not only transition well, but we're called to transition faithfully.
Yeah.
And wherever you're at, whatever you're dealing with, know that there is a plan that you may not be able to see, but God created you to live in his purpose. And if you're not living there, that transition's even worse. So, man, Tyler, thank you so much for being here today, man. And we'll catch y'all next week for the next episode of Talk to Walk. Go get Whataburger if you're close to one. But yeah, peace out.